2 days ago, Eala walked onto center court and did something almost nobody expected. She knocked out the defending Wimbledon champion. She beat Iga Swiatek. Not on a small court. Not in a quiet match nobody watched. She did it at Wimbledon, on center court, in front of a crowd that slowly realized it was watching history shift in real time. For 48 hours, that was supposed to be the whole story. The upset. The shock. The tears. The Filipino flags. The young player from the Philippines who stepped onto the biggest stage in tennis and refused to look small. But 2 days later, when Eala returned to that same court, people noticed something else before the match even settled. Tape, right leg, left forearm, visible strapping. The kind of detail you cannot stop seeing once your eyes find it. And one former Wimbledon champion noticed too. Marion Bartoli looked at Eala and raised the question a lot of people watching at home were already asking. Was this just normal tour maintenance after the biggest win of her career? Or was Eala carrying something nobody outside her team fully understood? That question spread fast because the image was easy to read the dramatic way. A young player beats a champion. A young player comes back 48 hours later taped up. A young player loses a brutal match to Jasmine Paolini. And suddenly, the tape becomes the story. But here is where this gets more interesting. Eala had every chance to use that tape as protection. She could have made it the reason. She could have let people believe her body was the explanation. She could have walked into the press room and turned the loss into a story about pain, fatigue, bad timing, and physical cost. Nobody would have blamed her. She had just played the match of her life against Swiatek. She had carried the emotion of a historic win. She had returned to center court with less than 48 hours to reset. She had tape on her body that everyone could see. The excuse was sitting right there. And she did not take it. That is the real story. Not whether every strip of tape proved a secret injury. Not whether her body was perfect. Not whether the Swiatek match left no mark. The real story is what Eala refused to do after losing. She refused to hide behind the tape. And that tells you more about her than the tape ever could. By the end of this video, you are going to understand why that visible strapping became one of the most talked about details of her Wimbledon exit. You are going to understand what the Swiatek win may have cost her. You are going to understand why the Paolini loss was not a collapse. And most importantly, you are going to understand why the most revealing thing about Eala was not the tape on her body. It was the discipline in her response. Because sometimes a player proves she belongs when she wins. But sometimes she proves something even deeper when she refuses to make excuses after she loses. To understand why this mattered, go back to the match that changed everything. The Swiatek match was not normal. It was not a lucky upset. It was not one of those strange days where a top player falls apart and the younger player simply survives. This was center court. This was Wimbledon. This was Iga Swiatek, a defending champion, a Grand Slam force, a player who knows how to take control of a match and make the opponent feel the weight of her reputation. Eala was not supposed to look comfortable there. She was supposed to feel the court. She was supposed to feel the name across the net. She was supposed to feel the moment. Instead, she played like someone who had already decided she belonged. The first set alone lasted 85 minutes. 85 minutes for one set. That is not just long. That is expensive. Every sprint to a short ball. Every hard push off the grass. Every wide ball chased at full stretch. Every serve under pressure. Every rally where the lungs burn but the point keeps going. Then came the tiebreak. 11 points to 9. That is not a simple ending. That is a test of nerve. That is one player trying to close the door and another refusing to leave. Eala saved set points. She kept coming back. She kept forcing one more ball. She kept making Swiatek earn every inch. And when she finally won that set, the match changed. The crowd felt it. The story changed. The belief changed. But the body does not care that the story is beautiful. The body only knows the work. That kind of set does not disappear because the scoreboard says you won. It stays in the legs. It stays in the shoulder. It stays in the forearm. It stays in the nervous system. And after a match like that, recovery is not automatic. Some parts of the body can bounce back quickly. Other parts do not. Explosive movement can feel a little dull. The serve can lose a little bite. The legs can feel a step late. The mind can feel ready while the body is still paying the bill. That is the hidden cost of a Grand Slam run. The tournament gives you a historic moment. Then it asks you to repeat the level almost immediately. No long break, no full reset. No week to breathe. You win. You answer questions. You manage the emotion. You try to sleep. You wake up sore. Then you play again. That is where Eala found herself. The Swiatek win gave her the biggest spotlight of her career. 48 hours later, that spotlight became pressure. And waiting for her was Jasmine Paolini. That matters. Because Paolini was not just another opponent. She was experienced. She was fast. She knew how to change rhythm. She knew how to make a younger player uncomfortable. She had already lived on big stages. And she had already played Eala before. That second meeting matters. The first time, a rising player can still surprise you. The second time, you come with information. You know the patterns. You know the danger. You know what hurt you before. You know what cannot happen again. Paolini was not walking into a fairy tale. She was walking into a problem she wanted to solve. And she solved enough of it. Eala did not collapse. That is important. She did not disappear. She lost in 3 sets. 6-4, 4-6, 6-3. 2 hours and 22 minutes on center court. That is not a player being exposed. That is a fight. Paolini took the first set. Eala answered. She forced a decider. But in the third set, the match started moving by inches. A few sharper returns from Paolini. A few points where Eala could not protect her serve enough. A few moments where experience made the choice faster and cleaner. That is how elite tennis often turns. Not with one dramatic collapse. With small differences that keep stacking until the scoreboard makes them look bigger than they felt. And this is where one detail becomes important. After the loss, Eala admitted her serve was not where it usually is. That could be a normal off day. Every player has them. But given what happened 48 hours earlier, it is hard to ignore. The serve is not just an arm motion, it starts from the ground. The legs load. The hips rotate. The core transfers force. The shoulder accelerates. The forearm stabilizes. The wrist finishes the movement. If one part of that chain is slightly tired, the whole serve can lose quality. Not enough for every fan to know why, but enough for a player like Paolini to feel it. Enough for returns to come back deeper. Enough for service games to become longer. Enough for pressure to arrive sooner. That does not prove Eala was injured. It does not prove Swiatek caused the loss. But it does make the serve comment feel less random. Because the first thing a body often gives away after an expensive match is not effort. It is sharpness. The player still tries. The player still competes. The player still wants the moment. But the clean first step is not always there. The full pop on serve is not always there. The calm reset after a tough point is not always there. And against Paolini, a small drop is enough. But physical cost is only half the story. There is another cost, and this one is harder to see. Emotional recovery. Beating Swiatek was not just a tennis result for Eala. It was a life event. It was the biggest win of her career. It was a national moment. It was the kind of victory that brings tears, interviews, messages, headlines, and pressure all at once. That takes energy too. Not the kind you can measure with a speed gun. Not the kind a physio can stretch out. But energy all the same. A player has to come down from the emotion. She has to turn a historic win back into a normal workday. She has to answer the same questions again and again. She has to feel the pride without getting swallowed by it. She has to enjoy the moment without thinking the tournament is finished. That is difficult at any age. At 21, after making history for your country, it is even harder. Eala herself spoke about managing emotions between matches. That detail matters. It tells you she knew the win had a psychological cost. She knew the next challenge was not just tennis. It was emotional control. How do you walk back onto the same court where your life just changed and act like it is just another match? How do you stop the Swiatek moment from staying too loud in your mind? How do you prepare for Paolini while the world still wants to talk about the upset? That is not easy, and this is the part many fans miss. A career-defining win can create a strange problem. It gives confidence, but it also takes bandwidth. It proves you belong, but it also raises expectation. It gives you belief, but it also gives you noise. And the next match asks you to play through all of it. That is why the Paolini match was so dangerous. Paolini was not just facing Alex Eala, the tennis player. She was facing Alex Eala 2 days after the biggest emotional high of her career. And Eala was not just trying to beat Paolini. She was trying to reset her body, reset her mind, and reset the story around her, all at the same time. That is a lot to ask in 48 hours. Again, this is not an excuse. Paolini earned the match. She played with clarity. She was sharper late. She made the right adjustments. She deserved the quarterfinal. But giving Paolini credit does not mean ignoring what Eala was carrying. Both things can be true. Paolini won the match, and Eala may have walked into it with a physical and emotional debt from the match that made her famous. That is what makes this story more interesting than a simple loss. Because the Swiatek win did not just lift Eala, it changed the conditions around her. Before that win, she was a dangerous young player. After that win, she was one of the stories of the tournament. Before that win, she could still feel like the challenger. After that win, people wanted another miracle. That kind of momentum can help a player. It can also drain her. That is the trap. People assume momentum is always fuel. Sometimes it is. But sometimes momentum is weight. More interviews, more attention, more messages, more expectation. More pressure to prove the win was not a one-time spark. And when the next match comes quickly, the player does not get to choose which part of momentum shows up, the fuel or the weight. Against Paolini, it looked like both were there. Eala still fought. She still forced 3 sets. She still showed why the Swiatek win was not an accident. But she did not have quite enough clarity late. Her serve was not sharp enough. Paolini was too experienced to waste the opening. And the tournament moved on without her. That is painful. But it is also valuable. Because this is exactly the kind of match that teaches a young player what the next level really costs. It is not enough to create the shock. You have to recover from it. It is not enough to beat the champion. You have to wake up the next morning and prepare, like the world did not just change. It is not enough to handle the tennis. You have to handle the attention that follows the tennis. That is the lesson. And if Eala learns it, this loss may become useful. Not because losing is good, it is not. Not because her Wimbledon exit should be celebrated. It should hurt. But because a painful loss, after a historic win, can show a team exactly what needs to be built next. Recovery plans, emotional reset routines, smarter management after long matches, better ways to protect the serve under fatigue, better ways to quiet the noise after a headline win. That is the invisible work that separates a breakthrough from a career. A breakthrough is one match. A career is the system you build around the match after it. That is where Eala is now. Her talent is not the question anymore. She has proven she can stand on center court and beat a champion. The question now is different. Can she back up the biggest moments? Can she recover after emotional peaks? Can she stay sharp when the schedule gives her very little time? Can her team help her manage the body and the mind before the next big tournament asks the same question again? That is why the US Open becomes so interesting. Not because anyone can promise a deep run, nobody can. But because the next time Eala wins a huge match, we will know what to watch next. Not just the celebration, the recovery. Not just the headline, the next warm-up. Not just the emotional interview, the first service game 2 days later. That is where the truth often appears. Because in tennis, the match after the miracle can reveal as much as the miracle itself. And that is the point of this whole story. Eala did not lose to Paolini because she beat Swiatek. That is too simple. She lost because Paolini played a better match when it mattered. But the Swiatek win may have changed the road leading into that match. It may have taken energy from the legs, sharpness from the serve, space from the mind, calm from the preparation. And when the next match came down to fine margins, those small costs may have mattered. That is not a scandal. That is not an excuse. That is Grand Slam tennis. Beautiful, brutal, unforgiving. The same stage that gives you history can ask for another payment before you have finished celebrating the first one. Eala learned that on center court. She learned that a famous win does not protect you from the next battle. She learned that momentum can lift you and drain you at the same time. She learned that once you become the story, every match after that becomes harder in a different way. And maybe that is the real value of this Wimbledon run. It did not only show what she can do at her best, it showed what the next challenge will be. Not talent, not courage, not belief. She has those. The next challenge is recovery. The next challenge is repeatability. The next challenge is learning how to come down from history fast enough to play another match like nothing happened. That is the level she is trying to reach. And that is why this loss should not make anyone less interested in her. It should make them more interested. Because now the story has moved from surprise to development. From can she do it once to can she build a career where she does it again and again? That is a much bigger question. And the answer will not come from one upset. It will come from the matches after the upsets, the days after the headlines, the tournaments after the breakthrough, the moments when everyone expects her to prove it again. That is where Alex Eala is headed. The Swiatek win changed her name. The Paolini loss showed her the cost. And if she understands that cost, if her team builds around it, if she learns how to recover from the biggest emotional moments of her career, then this Wimbledon exit may not look like a missed chance later. It may look like the lesson she needed before the next leap. Because beating a champion once can make the world notice. Learning how to recover from that win can make the world keep watching. And for Alex Eala, that may be the difference between one historic week and something much bigger.